Guys, welcome to another episode of The Pulse, the show where we are talking to people, doing cool things, using their voice for good, making a difference, hearing their stories. I love doing it. And of course, today we have one of those people. So he's a comedian, he's a host, podcast, radio, multiple books, a bread connoisseur. I don't even know how we're officially supposed to introduce Tom Papa. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, nice to be with you.
All those things work?
Yeah, all those things work. It depends on the day, which one has more focus. I always lead with comedian, but people are knowing me for the bread so much. I was on American Airlines recently and a flight attendant came up and said, oh, nice to see you. And I was like, oh, thanks. I thought they were going to say I was funny. Right. And they said, I'm so sorry. Our bread is really horrible on this flight.
How did this even happen? Like, you have this whole career, you just really love bread?
I was always cooking and hosting and stuff. I come from a family of, people who celebrate with food. And but when I was working on Red Oaks, this TV show on Amazon, one of the fellow writers taught me about sourdough bread and how it creates this like sourdough starter. And that's how the real bread was made. And for Christmas, my daughter got a sourdough starter started for me off of that story and gave it to me. And I always say that it was one of the greatest acting roles I've had was pretending that I was happy to get this gift on Christmas morning of this bowl of goo. But I made my first loaf of bread off of it, and something about it just hooked me. I mean, of course, everybody loves bread, but the process of it also hooked me. And I haven't stopped. I bring it to people, my podcast, I give it to people. I was just with Paul Reiser yesterday, and he's like, I really had to convince him, no, I made this. I've gotten really good at it, so it looks like store-bought bread. And Paul Reiser was like, I don't see you being funny and baking bread. This doesn't line up, but it's true.
Well, and it's not like you have any shortage of things to do with your time. And that's the thing that also has blown up.
I'm going to have a line of bread products coming out, like bread tools and stuff, just because this company came and approached me. But I wasn't doing it for marketing. I just love it. And I really do think there's something really valuable to having a craft outside of how you make your living, something that you can go to in your quiet time and work on and get better. If it's an instrument or working on a car or quilting or anything. I think it's a nice companion piece for your life.
And if somebody decides they also want to pay for that, then why not?
And if they want to start a bakery with me, I'm up for that too.
I love it. All right, so that's how we got to bread. But let's backpedal a little bit. How did this get started? How did the career get started? I feel like you've had an interesting journey of like 6 degrees of separation with various people.
I just wanted to be a comedian since I was a kid. Okay. And when I was like in 7th grade, it kind of all clicked for me because I was funny. And that's when I learned that you could actually be funny as a job. Like I had no idea in my little brain that grown-ups were funny for a living. And once I learned that, I was like, oh, all right, I'm going to head that way. All these other jobs look pretty lame. I'm going to go towards that as a career. And I just stuck to it, started doing open mics and just got hooked right away. It's a very difficult thing to start stand-up comedy. There's no pay for years. You're up late at night. You're traveling to weird places where nobody wants you. There's a lot of really negative things about it, but I was so happy. And that's how I knew this is exactly what I was supposed to be doing, because none of the hardship ever registered. It was just, oh man, I think I'm becoming a comedian.
13, like 14.
Yeah.
So even then you knew and figured out your path and just stayed the course.
There's all these things that could divert you, but I always just kept quietly moving towards that direction. I just always knew I was going to head that way. And I think it's a good test. I think it's, there's a lot of times obstacles get thrown up, and that really is kind of a good gut check of how passionate you are and how badly you want it.
When did you know that you could do it? Like, you continued to stay the course, but was there an aha moment when you're like, okay, this isn't a dream anymore, this is a career?
I think the first time I went on stage in a stand-up capacity. Like my first show there was 6 people in the audience, 4 were my friends, and they who paid the 2-drink minimum so I could get up on stage. And that first time I had to do 5 minutes, but I had to prepare it. Probably if we were to look at a video of it, it would probably be like, okay, like that he's got something, but this is, pretty horrible. But for me, standing up there and telling a joke and having people laugh in the spot I wanted them to laugh was so exciting.
Seems like you just still love this.
You have to stop and check yourself once in a while, especially like this time of year. You've been on a lot of flights, been through a lot of hotels where you couldn't find the switch. By the end of the year, we all, whatever job you're in, you start to feel like, yeah, we need a break. We need Christmas to come.
No doubt.
And I'm at that moment now, but the idea that I get tonight to like walk out on stage is just this quiet little gift. I never really separate how fortunate it is that I get to go do that. You have to remind yourself sometimes, you'll be in the airport and you can't find your bag or whatever. But when you get back to the hotel and you're kind of aggravated and you just kind of just calm down, it's just like, but wait a minute.
Right.
We are in Chicago. We're going on stage. We're going to tell jokes. They're going to give you money and you're going to go home.
And
after
people
everybody
want
applauds.
to come see you. And people are paying
to
come there and have you make them laugh. I think it's that interesting line. People are like, I have to do this. No, I get to do this.
Exactly.
So was there a big break? Because it transitioned obviously to doing movies and touring, with big names and being the big name and continuing going forward. So is there a time that you view as that big break?
My biggest break was when I was a young comic and I was just starting to make my way, and I met Jerry Seinfeld. He came back to the clubs after his show was over, and he was getting back into stand-up, and he just started hanging around the clubs in New York over like this month. He was just kind of like showing up and just kind of checking out what everybody was doing. And I was on stage 2 nights in a row when he walked in. And at the end of the second set, I came off and he called me over by the bar and he's like, "You're really funny." And I was like, whoa, boy. And I grabbed onto his coattails and didn't let go. I say it was my big break because him approving me made other people who were around, hiring you for shows and stuff be like, oh, well, if he thinks he's funny, then there's probably something there. So it helped that way. But it also really helped in that it was a confirmation of how I worked was a plausible path. Like I would see comedians like, drinking or partying, and they just seem to go up on stage and riff. And I was always sitting with my notebook and writing the jokes down and coming in and working on it and going. And he worked very similarly to me. So I just learned from him that you could really treat this as a craft that you could get better at. And that was huge. Because then I could even work harder at it without any doubt that if I put in the work, it'll pay off.
Right.
And that, when you're young and finding your way, that lesson, seeing anybody successful who's been down the path before you is a huge, huge, huge thing.
You mentioned before the 6 degrees of separation. You mentioned Jerry Seinfeld. And then there's Rob Zombie, and there's Steve Carell, and there's Judd Apatow. And you could name all these different names with this kind of 6 degrees of separation, how they all have touched your career or you've touched theirs at some point. Is that just natural evolution, or that to me was like, so you got Jerry Seinfeld and Rob Zombie in the same sentence together in a career?
Yeah, it's funny. I think it's pretty natural. Show business is kind of this community. And we're all just big kids hanging out, putting on plays and putting on films and doing shows. And there's a real camaraderie, and people help each other out the way that they were helped out at different parts of their career. I remember sensing that because I would start in New York hosting shows. And I remember one night I brought up like Jon Stewart, Ray Romano, Brett Butler, and a couple other people. And I was like, I just got here and I'm on the same stage as these folk. I think I found a trap door into show business. I mean, I found a way to get access to all these people, and then you start meeting them, and then over the years they become your friends. There'll be times I'll just be like flipping through my messages and be like, oh, there's Gaffigan or Daniel Tosh, and be like, wow, it's so weird that these people are in my phone. Get a bunch of great nephews and stuff, and I'll just say something like, just kind of mention somebody, and they're like, you can see in their eyes, like, dude, that's a big deal that you're friends with so and so. I'm like, yeah, you're right. You're right. I forget because they're my friends. But yeah, that is kind of cool.
Coming up next, it's one of the really cool benefits of a long career in comedy.
So they've seen my kids be born and now leave the house. So it's this kind of cool arc to the work.
I was watching clips of you pretending to be sad that your kids are out of the house now.
Just drop my kids off at school, and nobody tells you how hard it's going to be pretending to be sad. It's really true. Like, people who've watched my career, my family is a big part of my comedy. And, I don't just talk about my family, but, I talk about the community, I talk about the country and all that stuff. But it all is rooted in family. And through my specials, this is my third for Netflix, but my sixth overall. And they've watched my life progress. So they've seen my kids be born and now leave the house. So it's this kind of cool arc to the work. And there is a joy, I have to say, as much as I love them and they're still a part of my life and I can't wait, they're coming home for Thanksgiving. There is kind of this, I can go back to not being a everyday dad. This is pretty amazing. I used to be cool. Like, I had fun before I was a dad. I had fun, and I used to go to bars, and my wife was fun to be with when we weren't talking about school schedules. And it's like, whoa, nobody told me that there's this joy that's coming. I mean, the bummer is that you're excited to move on. And you're like, I have this freedom. But, it's like a ball player coming back and like, oh yeah, I'm gonna get back in the game, and you're like, yeah, but my knees aren't so good anymore.
Yeah, and a lot of people describe you as just that guy that they like sitting down and talking to, the person who just seems to enjoy bringing joy to other people.
When I see those comments of like, you got me through the pandemic, or it's so nice to spend time with your books or your comedy, I do appreciate it, because it is what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to not be vulgar. I'm not that way in my life. It just has to reflect who you are. And people ask, like, is it a choice to wear clean? And it's not. I talk about adult things and edgier things, but I just don't swear like that, because I don't really do that in my everyday life. I don't find that attractive. And there are definitely a lot of people that do it, and a lot of people are very successful at it. But I refuse to go down that path.
It just feels more authentic, right? Like, I'm not sitting here passing judgment on people who use profanity in their comedy. Do them if it is in fact them.
Yeah, there are guys that work that way and who are brilliant. And then there's other people who you can tell,
right,
they're all of a sudden starting to use like political stuff because they're getting response. They're using vulgarity or sex to get response. If they're chasing like this validation from an audience who they don't really even respect or care about, but they're doing it for like a marketing sense, I'm not cool with that. Even in the beginning of my career, I would go to the Comedy Cellar and there'd be like Dave Attell and Nick DiPaolo and Colin Quinn, like all these like edgy guys. And I was like, oh, I've got to be edgy when I get here. And I would start swearing or just trying to talk about stuff. And you could even sense the audience going like, what are you doing?
Right.
They didn't even know me yet, but they could just tell from my essence. They're like, I'm not buying it.
You were described as the ultimate escapist comedian, and also kind of spoke to ignorance of the news can be bliss sometimes. And I will extend that when the news can be so divisive and potentially problematic. Is that a choice, or is that just who you are?
There's always been bad stuff on the planet, but we're the first human beings that have to see everybody's problems and every single thing that's wrong in our face every single day. That's too much information. We're not designed for that. We weren't supposed to be able to see all of that. We have two eyes in the front of our heads, and this is our community, and this is what you got to deal with. And now it's the whole universe on your phone, in your face. That is toxic. That is a new thing that human beings have to deal with. And I truly don't believe that we need to know it all. I love being concerned. I don't love, but I think it's our responsibility to care for people and be aware of what's going on to a point. To a point. It can't be everything. This brain can only handle so much.
Coming up, he's been performing comedy literally globally, which can get a little overwhelming.
And I saw on the map all those dots of the places I'm going to be standing at a certain point. It was like, whew.
You're on tour. That's, pretty consistently on tour.
Yeah.
So tell us.
We just announced our new Grateful Bread tour.
Yes. So tell us about the Grateful Bread tour.
Yeah, that's going to be in 2025. A listener from my radio show actually named it, which is so great. The Grateful Bread tour is so funny. And we're hitting a whole bunch of great venues. And it's so funny because, like I was saying, like at the end of the year, you get pretty tired. Yeah. And now to be talking about the tour next year, and I saw on the map all those dots of the places I'm going to be standing at a certain point. It was like, whew, I'm gonna let my agent handle this one for a bit. But I'm really psyched. There'll be a whole new thing, a whole new act.
Next on The Pulse, what using your voice for good means to Tom Papa.
You're taking care of yourself and you're getting paid and you're doing your thing, but your work is also very valuable and it's touching other people all the time.
We ask everybody who comes on to end by telling us what the phrase use your voice for good means to you.
Whatever it is that you do, whatever it is, not just your voice like a comedic voice, but whatever thing that you're doing, we're all in this together and we're all working, and there's a housekeeper here that's going to keep this place going, and there's a person that's on your board making this show happen. Whatever your voice is, just keep in mind that you're taking care of yourself and you're getting paid and you're doing your thing, but your work is also very valuable and it's touching other people all the time. And if you're doing anything for other people, I think that's the good.
Hey guys, thanks so much for watching another episode of The Pulse with Bill Anderson. Today with comedian and host and author and generally good guy, Tom Papa. I enjoyed hearing his story. I've heard so many people who love his stand-up, can't wait to check it out, his books and so much more, but just his perspective and outlook on life. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Remember, you can watch or listen to, I should say, the entire unedited podcast, all places where podcasts are available. Go ahead and download them and download the Fox Local app so you have all of our shows right there at your fingertips on demand. Thank you so much again for watching, and I leave you today as I always do, reminding you whenever you can, use your voice for good and have a good one. I'm gonna go make some bread.
Do it, or at least eat it.